Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a good start of the week. So, as you can tell by the title of this video, that coming in what to expect. I want to talk about railroading and consent and character death. And like the concept of consent for character death is fucking silly. Everybody that I assume that everybody that watch my channel knows that. Let's get that out of the way already. By joining the game, you already consented to the fact that your character might die. So now that this is agreed upon, it's like Alexander McChrist, because like this video is a bit of reaction to not really a reaction, but it's something like that came to me watching a Alexander McChrist video, and I was saying in the comment. But in the video, he said like when you go into a boxing match, basically I'm paraphrasing, you consent of being punched in the face. Once you enter the ring, you already gave your consent. It's the same thing when you join an RPG with your character. You consider that this character might die, so you don't have to provide any further consent. So that's out of the way now. What I wanted to talk about is how railroading is what brought about this idea that the GM should have consented the player to kill the character. It's not two topics I want to cover, it's the one, but I want to make the link between those two. And it's something I talked about a bit before, but the fact that railroading is what led to player having those lengthy 30-page backstory. Because if the GM is really railroady, what's gonna happen? You come to the table with your character, and then the GM is gonna tell a story with those character. If it takes away the player agency, you're not really telling the story yourself. You're just you're just getting along for the ride. You're on the railroad. So because like the GM became at some point very, very railroady, I would say not top tier GM. They became very railroady. That's a very hard word for me to say, apparently. People wanted, like, they created this character and stuff like that, and they wanted to have a chance of telling a story with this character that they created. Hey, hello, Rex Steele. Nice seeing you. So they went to they started making those lengthy backstory because that was their one chance to tell a story with this character they created. And once you created this long backstory with your character, it creates like a displacement of the ownership of the character. A character in the RPG doesn't belong to the player. The character belongs to the world in which she lives, the camping world. The character belongs to the campaign. It's not your character. You're playing this character, so in a sense, yeah, it's kind of yours, but the character doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the world. But because you grew attached to this backstory, to making him special, making him unique, you have the impression that now you're just like lending this character to the GM, and now the GM is going to use this character that you created, that is yours, and on at his turn, tell a story with it. And that's why it feels bad when this character die, when the GM kill this character, because it feels like you lent this character to the GM. It's like if somebody crashed your car when you lend it to it. You crash your own car, that's one thing. If you want to do that, if you willingly crash your car, but if you lend your car to somebody and then he crash it while he could have avoided it, it was in his power to avoid it, but he decided not to, then you feel like a jerk. And people like to see their character in the same way. They kind of grew attached to it by creating those big backstory. And they created those big backstory because because they didn't feel like they were co-creator of the character story in the GM game, because the GM would take away their agency. Hello, Crap Phone. Hello, Sean. Majors Musing. So when we talk against like railroading is a serious problem, and it has railroading and its consequence has been disastrous for the RPG hobby, to borrow a phrasing for somebody else. And we're not about to see the end of railroading, especially not now. People like are raving about Baldur's Gate 3, and that might bring about like the games tend to be very like faithful to D&D 5e, and that might bring about a new crop of D&D player. I think that might very be true. The game, I didn't play the game, I was too interested, but the game is very successful. There's no denying it. But video game are always gonna be, to some extent, railroady, because you can have different track, you can change track from one another, but the game cannot like create content on the fly like a GM could and should. There's always gonna be path that you can choose. If there's many path, it can look like you got a little more freedom, but you're always on a path. And this is what people want to do now when they play role-playing game. They try to emulate those video game. We used to, or we should emulate a world. That's what we're trying to do. We try to emulate a world, and in the world we don't know what's gonna happen. We don't have like a story pre-written. We don't have a branching story pre-written. We write the story. There's no fate, but what we do, we write the story as we live, as we go through it, and that's what we should emulate with role-playing game. And but now at some point, people wanted to emulate maybe movies or TV shows, or emulate. At some point, it was like emulate Critical Role, and emulate now video games. So I'm sure there's a lot of people going to try like to play Baldur's Gate by hand, you know what I mean? And the GM is going to become prepared did a lot of work to get those little story and different branches, and he's going to come to the table with this. Major's Musing say trying to appeal to the video game crowd in tabletop game is part of what led to 4E and 5E. We could see that a lot in 4E, but that's an interesting one because in 4E they were trying to cater to the video game crowd on a mechanic side, while now they're trying to gather on to the video game crowd on the narrative side with giving them. And I say like we blame the GM for railroading, but it's not something that is only on the of the fault of the GM. Actually, if the player come on the table without being in the mindset of being co-creator of what happened in the world, if they come on the table expecting to have a story told to them, instead of like creating that story on the fly with the GM, then yeah, the GM kind of has to respond to that. You see a lot of people that are not very proactive in their decision. They're just there waiting for the GM to tell them when to roll. And yeah, so there's a bit of it's on both sides there. And also like the players come to the table expecting to be told a story, and because they come oftentimes from video games, they're video gamer. When you play video game, you know that there's like branching path. You know that there's like decision you can make that's going to be on one track or the other. So it changes the way in a decision because you're looking for the path. You're looking for the correct path, the right way that's going to lead to the optimal answer. You expect that the GM has all the answer pre-written and pre-figured out, because that's how it is in a video game. Like, the story is going to be there. So you're looking like, oh, you try to figure out what's going to happen, but in the logic, it's a different game than just like if the GM just make up stuff on the fly. The GM shouldn't have all the answer. The GM can come up with question, but you figure out the answer, all the people together. Like, I stress a lot about that. The players are meant to be co-creator. of the story. They're not there just to. They're not the audience of the story. Rex still say a lot of video game RPG are bad at their job anyways because they don't put in the importance of choices with consequence. Very few video games do that, unfortunately. Yeah, that's a very oftentimes a very easy way to do video game if you give the impression of choice. But and we see that with in GMing as well. It's the question of the quantum ogre that people call, if the player chose path A, they're gonna encounter an ogre. If they chose path B, they're gonna encounter the same ogre that now is in a different place. You know what I mean? That we've seen that a lot. It's a well-known fact. If you don't have like a and that comes from, oh, you want to prep your you have like this story in mind you want to tell, and the story require the player to encounter this ogre. So the ogre is gonna be wherever the player go. It's a bad habit. You shouldn't do that, and like that's what I'm saying. You don't want to tell a story. You want to experience a world. Majors Musing say many players and DMs just want to get to the exciting stuff, the cinematic battle, the important role play interaction, the case joke element, but many don't want to play the game. I like to get into the exciting stuff, but that's the thing. I don't know what the exciting stuff is gonna be. I don't know, I don't have a list of checkpoint that like I often say, like I have like conflict in the world that are like that I thought about. I don't know how those conflict gonna result. I don't know what the role of the player are gonna be in this conflict, if any. They might not be. I just follow the lead of the player. The player control the protagonist. The protagonist decide where the story goes. The story is not about the world. It's not about the settings. The story, the narrative that we go through, is the story of those characters in this world, in this setting, but it's the story of the character. So you have to follow the lead of your player. You don't want to force them into a certain path. Yeah, like Risk is still like story driven by player's action. Exactly. The best video game give the illusion of choice. Creating a video game plot that is inherently railroady, such as the premise is you are in a quest, can mitigate the lack of sandbox element. Yeah, but there's also like the other side to that. When you when you're in a video game that when you're in a video game like The Witcher 3, for example, that is sandboxy, but it becomes silly because you have like this urgency, like, oh, you need to do that, and a lot of video games do that. You get this main quest like Skyrim. Yeah, like this main quest with this with this urgency to it, but then you can ignore it for like hundreds of hours and do all kind of like meaningless stuff on the side, and nobody cares, and the world just wait. You know what I mean? So that's also silly. That's another thing that video games do that you should absolutely avoid in your role-playing game. Don't put the world on hold. The world doesn't stop. Like, the world doesn't just exist and keep going forward when the players are like the world doesn't just exist in the 100 feet radius around the player. LOL. That sounds like a LOL. No, hello L. And like when I play like a video game like Warband, the world doesn't stop, doesn't care about the player. You're just a guy there in the world. You make your own story. I think that's the right way to do a sandbox. But when they try to do like those quests and those paths and that's almost, even we call them sandbox in a role playing sense, in a tabletop role playing game, TTRPG. They would be more like a theme park because you got those rides. Each quest is a ride. You can choose which ride you go on. You can choose in which order you go on. But each quest is a ride. So you get in. Now you're on this little self-contained railroad. You do this ride, and then you get off and you go do another one. So even like video game sandbox, they're at best theme park, most of them, like all those narrative game. I don't like narrative game for that reason. If I play a video game, I want a challenge. I like look at the game I played. I play Warband, no storyline. You make your own. I played Dark Souls. There is a storyline. There's a deep lore and stuff like that, but it doesn't get in your way. It doesn't like shove it in your face. If you want to interact with it, you do. But other than that, you just like do the game. Hotline Miami that I was playing. Was it on Sunday? And same thing, like there is a storyline, there's a narrative in there, and you have those cutscene between each mission that you can just like skip pretty fast through. But like because the nature of the game that is like so fast paced and so stressful, they're almost there like as a time for you to decompress. But I think that's what video games should do. Like video games are not good at narrative. Video games are not RPG. They're never gonna be. They cannot emulate. And it's sad to see player trying to emulate video game in their TTRPG, because the idea is like the video game RPG, what they call RPG, tries so hard to emulate the experience you can get on the table, but the experience you can get on the table can be so much deeper and so much bigger. So don't try to emulate video game. That's a big point I could make here, even though it's I'm going a bit off topic there. But I guess it's still on topic. It's about like railroading and stuff like that. That's what I should have called, like railroading and its consequences. Maybe I renamed the stream. You can't ignore it and Fallout 1. Yeah, there's some game that does that better than another. Modern video game like or worse in that, because like player want easiness and convenience, and they get upset if, oh man, I didn't know the quest would keep on going. What do you think? No video game is a truly sandbox. There's always place you can never go. Yeah, the code has limit, exactly. Skyrim, Aldrin is going to end the world. Player, nah, I'd be fine. I'm gonna go drop 1,000 cabbage off the top of a mountain to see them roll down. I want to try that. Video game, if Sean or watch that, go on a mountain with 1,000 cabbage and drop them off. I'm gonna watch your stream, you doing it. Crap phone say video games and TTRPG are not the same thing. Video games are about overcoming challenges. Yeah, TTRPG are about story and character development in living world. TTRPG have a wider scope. Exactly. And like I said, like both are fine hobby, both are fun, but don't mistake one for the other. Don't think that you're familiar with like the true RPG experience, which is TTRPG experience, if you play a video game computer RPG, and don't try to emulate a computer experience with like that's something I said with the Dark Soul TTRPG as well, the Dark Soul role playing game as well. They try to emulate the video game way too much, where they should have done their own thing. They should have like played to the strength, like use the lore, use the setting, use the tone, but make it as a role-playing game. Don't try to do a video game by hand. Theme park is a great analogy. Yeah, it's that's usually what we call like the sandbox, the theme park, and the railroad. Those are like the level of like freedom and player agency you can give. Hello, crafting gamer. Did Max turn me into a joke? Did you just say LOL at me? Yeah. It's because I cannot pronounce H. You think I'm funny? Funny like a clown? I'm a clown to you? Okay, I forgot more of the speech from the movie. I forgot which movie is that. I'm a clown. Is that like the movie with Robert De Niro, right? I forget which from what movie it comes. I'm not a big movie guy. Oh yeah, and one thing I wanted to say about as well, because I said like people try to emulate video game in their role playing game now, and I said like at some point people try to emulate Critical Role in their role playing game, and people try to emulate fiction like movies and books in their video game, and people say, yeah, but from the beginning. Oh, it's Joe Pesci in Goodfella. Oh yeah, okay, that's close. I'm Italian guy. They but at the beginning of the hobby, that's a point where like people oftentimes like, well, the hobby like evolved from wargaming, and that's important because no, people didn't start by trying to emulate fiction, because when you do a wargame campaign, you're not trying to go through a story, you're figuring out what's happening. There's oftentimes like this thing like between like role player and wargamer and stuff like that, but actually the original DNA of role-playing game from the wargame hobby, the fact that it came from the wargame hobby, is important in that sense. Because, like I said, you want to you the players involved, you're figuring out what the story is as you go. And that's a wargaming thing. If you were to emulate fiction and try, like, because fiction, you know where you want the story to go, you have those plot hook and stuff like that. The true experience of the role-playing game, the tabletop role-playing game, where you have emergent narrative that is not pre-planned, that you figure out through the player's action, with the GM reacting to the player's action. Honest and reactive. What's the D? I forgot. Dialogue. Honest and reactive dialogue. Roleplay the hard way. But yeah, the GM is reacting to the player's action, and the players are co-creators of the world. That is from the war game side of the hobby. We're not retelling Lord of the Ring. We're figuring out, if we were in the world of Lord of the Ring, and those characters and all those conflict, what would happen? So that's what I want to talk about today, I guess. It might be a shorter video. I used to do a lot of short video, but if I said what I had to say, why stretch it longer than that? But what was I about to say? Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say. When you see thing, if you go on X, on Twitter, it's always gonna be fucking Twitter. Don't call it X. If you go on Twitter and you see people talking about stuff like that, like, oh no, the GM shouldn't kill like the player because you should have you should ask the consent of the player. Oh yeah, the GM shouldn't kill the player. That's true. Okay, the GM shouldn't kill the character without asking the consent of the player, without the player agreeing of that death. That's what I'm talking about. That's it. That's come directly, or with a few steps, I guess. But that comes from railroading GM. Think about it. You see those silly things, and you think like, man, people are so stupid. But if you just say like, no, you don't need to do that, now you're addressing the symptom. If you want to address the disease, go to the root. I'm a radical, which means going to the root. That's what I do. I go to the root. So you look at the problem like that, and you think, where did that come from? And then, like I said, you come back one step. It comes from player feel that they own their character instead of the character being owned by the world, like belonging to the world. They feel like, oh, that's my character, my creation, it's mine. Because they make those big backstory. They make those big backstory, those 30-page backstory, because the player took away their agency by putting them on a railroad, and they wanted to have a shot at telling a story with their character. So all this silliness, all this perversion of the hobby comes from this railroading side of thing. So if you want to really solve the problem, what you need to tell people is that stop trying to tell a story. You don't try to tell a story. You try to figure out a story. You're seeing the story emerge by itself. You're just there to you're not taking the player or not the audience, the player, your co-creator. They control the protagonist. It's not the story of the world, it's the story of the protagonist. So you have to react to what the player do when you're a GM. You're not leading. The GM is not leading the player. The players are leading the GM. If you do that, also, it's gonna take like much less prep, or it's gonna refocus your prep. And if you watch on Thursday on Dice and Design, the new show that I have with Tyler, Flame Zombie, we're gonna talk about game prep. So we're certainly gonna touch about those topics, where to put your prep if you want to have a real sandbox experience. But yeah, address the root cause of the issue. not just like the it's don't you don't have to ask like you can address the symptom, but you're gonna solve so much more issue if you go back to the root, which is railroading. So don't railroad your player. React to their to their input. Treat them as co-creator, not as the audience. And then because now they're not gonna feel the same ownership. Now the characters belong to the world. If the character die, you're not being a jerk that borrowed their character to tell your story and then kill it. No, it's the character that belong in this world, and from the action that happened, then the character die. I hope this was interesting, or like maybe give you like some food for thought, I guess, and maybe would be helpful to somebody. Some like just this change of perspective, and now it just doesn't become like oh, you're stupid for doing the character for asking for consent for that. No, it's like here's why you need that. It comes from this mistake that you made. Try this other style of play where you don't have those issues that arise. Crapphone Sessioner rants about TTRPG that try to emulate video game or fun to watch. Yeah, and he's right on that. Railroad is about the destination. Sandbox is about the journey. That's a great way to put it. And Railroad, or like people know that I hate trains. I've talked about that before, because trains is the end of adventure. Think about like when people used to go to the West. It was this big journey that they had to go on, and a lot of people died on the way there. It was an adventure in itself. Then came the trains. Just sit there, you'll get there. You just sit there bored, reading the newspaper, and you're gonna be taken like there's no adventure there. There's no more like there's no more sense of wanderlust, and it goes fast, and you're just in that box. You don't even have to look outside if you don't want to. You're not driving yourself. Trains are bad. Railroad are bad in the game. So yeah, Sandbox is about the journey. That's a great way to put it. Railroad is about destination. Sandbox is about the journey. But think about that. Just dropping in. Hello, Flatey. Real fast in lunch. Yeah, I was just like talking about. I hope you got a bit of the what I was talking about. One of the fun moment of and running Sandbox adventures when the character discovered that the cat's been there. Discover the cat's been there. What cat? When the character discovered the cat's been there. I don't know if you. I missed that. I don't get it. If you sit at my table, you're consenting to the possibility that your character will die. Yeah, that's what I would talk about in the beginning of the stream. Like I just got it away. Yeah, just by joining the game. Right? It's like Macris say, when you go in a boxing ring, by getting into the ring, you consent that you're gonna get punched in the face at some point. But I wanted to go a little deeper and say like, where does that idea that because that's the thing, like it's like when you say your character, it's like the character that you're portraying. The character is not yours. It's not really yours. It's a character in this world. You're just portraying it. Player don't don't build world. Tyler is idiot. No, Tyler is smart. Tyler's a smart guy. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, player don't really build the world. Like building the world is the responsibility of the GM. But that's the thing. The narrative that we go through is not about the world. It's about the character. Dungeon Worlds Mantra, play to find out what happens. Maybe that's the one good thing about Dungeon World. I bet no, I'm kidding. I'm not a big fan of Dungeon World for different reasons. I bet the money that I can run better game than most people that spend a lot of time talking about the right way to run a game. I can already out debate most of them. Thus, I'm better thinker. Well, we'll see when you put your channel out. The game is designed to tell the story for you. The GM simply maintain the function of the game and that keep the story moving. Well, maintain the function of the game, but you also have to provide a little more than that, because he does have to provide like a world and NPCs and stuff like that. There is a it's a little more involved. Like people say, like, oh, the GM is just a referee. Well, no, because you have to create the character, you have to populate that world. You know what I mean? Unless you do everything on chart, you're more than a referee. And if you do everything on chart, like the referee thing, it could be easily replaced by system. You don't need a person for that. You need a person to create people. Sandbox is also about discovery, yeah. Railroad give you dysentery. Don't let your GM give you dysentery. Yeah. Oh no, I see why you don't like trains. Yeah. Well, I'm not. I don't just. I don't just dislike train because I'm kind of like a weirdo with those weird idiosyncrasy. Like, if I say I don't like trains, you can, or I don't like X, whatever. You can be sure there's a reason behind it, because I overthink everything. Sandbox, cat litter box. Yeah. Oh, I know about those. I got a lot of cats. Railroading GMs are at least half a consequence of low effort player that don't create story. Rather they sit down. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was telling about. I think, I don't know if you were there. I talk about that. Like, it's not only on the GM that, oh, the GM railroad, that's wrong. Like, yeah, the player that just came on the table, like, and don't put any effort in the game, just sit there to be told a story. Oh, I made this character. Now here, GM, you can have my character and tell a story with it, but don't kill it, because I care about this character. It's my character. I created it and I made all this backstory. No, stop it. It's like, but yeah, like and that's really like the video game mindset. Like, and you see that too when player like just look at their sheet, like in their button they can press and stuff like that. It's like there's a lot of it, like on the, and there's almost like certain type of player that you kind of have to railroad, because they're never going to bring anything to the table. They're just going to wait there until you give them the option. Say, no, just tell me what you do. Tell me where you are. Tell me what you do. The DM is a referee for sure, but it's also more than just a referee. Yeah, exactly. There's more to it than just that. It's part of his role. Yeah, making it sound a little more basic than it really is. Well, it's all right. It's limited character. If most players were self-motivated, there would be no market for adventure modules. The adventure module market is growing, not retracting. Yeah, and I don't like module. I talk about that in the past as well. Some of them are okay. Some of them are like, if they just like present like specific locations, stuff like that. Some of them are okay, but another module where like because some of them are more sandboxy. Some of them just like pose you question. But a lot of the module like that, you see like, oh, this happened and this character won this, and if the player does that, then the character is going to do this, but if the player do this, then the character is going to do that. You know what I mean? Just like, I find those like fucking painful to read, to prep. I find it like much more prep than just if you are, but we're going to talk about that on Thursday night, I guess. But like, I often say I'm a very like fly by the seat of your pants kind of GM. Like, I do very, very little prep. I just react to what the players say. But also sometimes I have to recognize that I've been doing that for a very long time, and I didn't always be like that. It's something. So I guess there's something like a skill that is learned there as well. But from now, like when I take a module, like when I will look at one, I find them very. I find them much more work than what they're worth. I had a guy guest in to one of my game. Oh, okay. I had a guest in to one of my game. We got angry when his character died and demanded apology from everyone because we should have warned him about what kind of game it was. That was it. The first time he was playing RPG, like didn't know what he was getting to. You got hit point there. You're gonna lose some hit point. What do you think is gonna happen then? Hey, Condor GM. Condor DM. Why is it GM? Sorry, Condor DM. I create the world. Me and the player develop that world from that starting point. I don't think Railroad are all bad, but I prefer the sandbox. Forced Railroad or BS. Offered Railroad or fine. Well, yeah, like I said, like there's some type of player that you kind of need to railroad, but if you can like train them a bit better and say take the lead, you know, you're in the driver's seat. I think and that's something that is hard to learn even for a GM, letting the player be in the driver's seat. Uh, I think the best GM like need a lot of humility in that sense. You know what I mean? Eh, In a way, you're there to like, yeah, like I like being surprised. I don't know. I like to see where the story is going. You know, I don't know in advance. So, and not just because of the dice, because of I don't know what the player is going to say. I'll say it to insert name because most players are boring and dumb and have no imagination. The old geek just did a video people failing ability check. They forgot how to imagine after 1E. Well, you know that's the thing too. When you expand the hobby, you know you cannot have like a you cannot have like a full hobby with a lot of people if you just like cater to the top 15% of the crowd. You know what I mean? It's like at some point you're gonna bring the normies, but it's a skill that can be learned and that can be developed. But you have to train your player right. Comment post gaming. I can deal with the complaining about character death. The whole trend drains the fun out of it. Yeah, and like and dying is it's so like your character like there's something that are worth dying for, and if your character is a hero and stuff like that, you should recognize that. Why are you being such a pussy? You're trying to play a guy that's gonna become a hero, but you're being a pussy about it. Like stop it. And especially like if you have like you know you look at the Viking, that dying in battle was the best outcome they could achieve hope for in some way, because then they could get to Valhalla. So there are stuff like that, and like a Christian that dying if you in fighting for a righteous cause would help them get to heaven, or like atone for some of their sin. And same thing with the Muslim and stuff like that. But now people come to the game and they're being like fucking pussy about their character dying. You know what I mean? Like dying is gonna happen at some point. What do you do with your life? The fact that you're gonna die at some point make your life meaningful. What did you achieve in that life? So stop being a pussy about your character dying, and stop being a pussy about you dying. So at some point you're gonna die. So live a little. YOLO. No, I'm kidding. Major's musing. So no, he was a friend of one of the player, and apparently was a long time DM starting with 2E. Really? That must be like a boring ass game that he ran. Condor say I tell player up front if it's a real roll, though I don't run them often. I haven't railroad in like 8 years. Yeah, it's just like I'm not gonna bother with railroad personally, just because I don't. It's like I wouldn't mind like going on one, but if I know in advance what to expect, but running them, I have no fun in it. I hear you on this and why you oppose railroad. I expect your view on this. Yeah, at some point, it's a matter of taste too. Cure for player who complain about character death, run some OD&D for them, or maybe start them with a funnel. Then you'll know right away. Yeah, like the DCC funnel, people talk a lot about it. Get the day out of the way, the death out of the way. You start with all those characters, most of them are gonna die. Easy times make weak men. Yeah, hard times make heroes. Hard time make people dead too. Yeah. Well, you need to have some opposition and some challenge to be heroic. That which doesn't kill us make us stranger or stronger. I don't know if it was a typo or a joke. I call it avatar style play. The player have tied their self-worth and ego into the success or failure of the character and take it really personally when thing goes out. Yeah, exactly. And I think if you make the character, if you make the player, sorry, co-creator of the story, and if you stress that in them, then their success as player is not tied to their success as a character, but to the success of the narrative. if the emergent narrative is cool and makes sense and is emergent, is immersive and stuff like that, now as a player, you succeeded because you are co-creator of this narrative. You're not just this character. So then the character can die, but if the death was justified, if the death was a cool death, so like, or even if it's just like something that was just something that happened because the world feels real, you help make the world feel real. So now you have a success as a player, even though the character might have failed. Yeah, or stronger. Yeah. I agree in part. I think a lot of other of the player is it well. The player pool is heavily composed of less creative, driven, and yeah, exactly. And like I said, a lot of people like join because like they played some video game and they've been touched around. You know, they come to the hobby from other hobby that are somewhat connects, but those other hobby give them like bad habits, and it's our role as older GM and older player to take out those bad habits and say like, you know what, it's not your grandma's video game now. We're into role playing game at the table. Yeah. All right. I think I'm gonna wrap it up, guys. I thank you all for joining, and I hope give you some food for thought and some yeah, maybe something you can discuss with your group. And if you feel like if you see player that get upset of that by dying, or a player that want to be that are not proactive enough and just want to sit and be told the story, maybe think about what I discussed here. Maybe it's gonna give you like some idea. I'm probably gonna stream some Warband tomorrow night because I guess that kind of became a tradition. Like those streams that were like kind of impromptu and whenever I feel like it, I guess it kind of became like a regular Wednesday evening thing. And on Thursday, I'm gonna have like the second episode, which is gonna be episode 1 because the first one was a test run, a pilot. We're gonna have another episode of Dyson Design with Tyler from the channel Flame Zombie 1. And we're going to talk about game prep. So I'm sure a lot of it is going to come back to what we talk about today. So join us then. I think Tyler is a smart guy, despite what Elle says. But Elle badmouth everybody, so who fucking care at that point. Don't take it too seriously, you know what I mean? Like stranger on the internet, man. Just like, yeah, everybody got their attention. Oh, Jaeger. Yeah, I enjoy playing more after I started not to be so precious about my PC. Yeah, I play for maximum fun, and if my decision get my PC kill, that's the way it goes. Yeah, at some point I should go back to that's what they call like simulationist player in the gamist in the GNS theory. Like I made a video about it before. A lot of people like misunderstand what the simulationist in GNS said, and I'm not a big fan of the GNS theory, but you can go back into my video list, and if you want to know about it, letting go just a little bit actually makes the game more fun. Yeah. All right. See you guys. Thank you, DM. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.